GM. Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, guys. I was muted there. Yep. Hey, sir.
Oh,
Good morning.
good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
I was saying I almost didn't want to start the meeting because that music was just fire.
Oh, what were you listening to?
Amphitheater waiting music.
Oh, there's amphitheater waiting music. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just heard about it as well. I saw the comments here.
It's like elevator music.
Mm-hmm.
Very
No,
cool.
future. I would guess it's probably not copyright protected. I mean, I can't imagine Discord would have copyrighted music
Yeah.
for like streamers and stuff. But yeah, might want to check.
GM. Zombie Shepherd. Are we live? Could I get a confirmation? I think we are, but I'm screen sharing. Actually, let me just 1 second here. Okay, cool. Right on. Good morning, everybody. It's I don't know, like the sixth DAO meeting of the year. So we're moving. A lot going on, a lot to talk about in the DAO today, during our meeting. And so I guess we'll get right into it. Unless you had anything, Coder Dan, before we kick off.
No, we'll go through the open posts here.
Okay. Yeah, and then at the end of this, I'll just run through kind of what went down since the last meeting, and then maybe we can go through a little itinerary for today in case you had something specific there. But we have many different topics to discuss, and so yeah, thank you for dropping the mirror board there. Okay. So just an update on some things we have kind of discussed, but maybe need some attention. And so we have Rarity Farming opting in. This was a post basically proposing that if you were to participate in Rarity Farming, you have to sign up like before the Rarity Farming season begins. And that's just a way to see the minimum level of participation out there for people who are going to be participating in Rarity Farming to collect on rewards. And so if you don't opt in this case, right, if this passes as a proposal, if you don't opt in, what would happen is you don't get your Rarity Farming rewards. And the rewards that wouldn't be spent could be sent back to the DAO treasury and could be used for future Rarity Farming rewards. So I think this is the beginning of a conversation around how can we make Rarity Farming more sustainable. And so, definitely weigh into that forum discussion there. Let me link it in the chat. Hardcore is saying it seems kind of dead. It could use a little love. So if you do have an opinion on opting in on Rarity Farming, Gotchi Bulls, how do I opt in? I'd imagine you have to just sign a transaction or some sort of a signature just to know that, from that wallet that you're going to be participating. But I don't know. Dan, you might have a more technical answer for that.
I really don't. I mean, there's many ways we could do it. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Not going to specify any specific ways at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Choine saying a fan of the opt-in. Yeah. Definitely check that discussion out. Could use some love, and maybe we'll bring it up next week for a more in-depth look. But I believe we did discuss that quite a bit, either last week or the week before. So. What's this one? Raffle tickets and glitter. And so this is buying raffle tickets with glitter. We had this conversation many months back, and we were trying to figure out kind of like the relationship between glitter and a raffle ticket. So this was kind of a conversation in part with moving away from friends. Would be at some point these friends would start running kind of low for these raffles, and at that point, you might want to switch to the glitter model. So uh, there's still a conversation going here, but maybe it's worth revisiting and providing your input there. I'll link that as well. No future. Will we be willing to make the leaderboard shorter? 1K versus 7.5K for ready farming. Scale back rewards accordingly. Yeah, it's an interesting discussion to have. I guess that would really depend on those others being excluded. How how vocal they would be, basically. I think that's quite a bit. Maybe it could be a middle approach. I'm not sure. But raffle tickets and glitter, this is a topic where you might want to check that out, and we can maybe get some movement on that. The DDT plan, I can't get confirmation, but it looks like this plan that we had put forward for the DDT, which was kind of like a mixed duty between like managing the DAO and pushing some Forge features out, Forge development. That has kind of been withdrawn back to the drawing table with that. And so kind of taking your feedback into account here, specifically with the Forge team being a part of the DAO development plan. And so we're going to have another conversation on how to move forward with this. But the DAO obviously does need leadership. Dr. Wagme, you are in the house. So maybe once we're done here, I'll get you up on stage and we can talk about the DAO leadership. Bonding curve. Can we touch? Are we going to touch on the bonding curve today? I mean, we did go through the whole process last week, but there has been some discussion since then. Is there something we would like to touch on regarding bonding curve today? I had a couple questions as well. So is that something we're going to be covering in any aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I'm around. Golden Cross is around as well.
Okay.
I'm not sure if he's able to get on the mic or not, but we're happy to go over anything the community wants to ask. I mean, there's a lot of conversation in the forums already, so we don't really want to repeat things that are already there. But if there's any like specific questions, happy to take those. And just some context, we'll probably start putting out the core prop or the sig prop within a couple of days, probably Wednesday, Thursday. If there's no like major not opposition, but any new things that the community would ask for before that sig prop goes out.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let's move on to our proposals. We'll do a proposal review here, and then we'll get right into it. So Agate 58 launching round 2 parcel rolls, the VRF re-rolls, sorry. Met quorum with 19 million ghosts and 56% in favor of and 43% against. And so Agate 57 established the core framework guiding wearable release. So cores I believe the cores are going to get GBM'd. There's a certain amount of cores that are going to be released with this initial Forge launch. Oh yeah, I know, no future. I turn my head when I talk, and that's become a habit that it's showing itself now. So I'll definitely remember that. Thank you. Agate 57, that was a core framework release. That met quorum with 19 million ghosts, 95% in favor of. Infinity Keys and Aavegotchi partnership. This one passed sig prop with 14 million meeting quorum, 97% in favor of funding the proposal after the adjusted numbers. it needs a core prop. I've already talked to chair, so they do have one drafted there. I don't think there are going to be any significant changes to it, but if there are, they're going to edit the proposal and get it your way, Dan, so that when you guys post your core props, that'll be there for you. Agate 59, these are core props. So Agate 59, 2023 DTF budget request. That has met quorum with 9.3 million, 93% in favor of. And that one ends February 9th at 9 a.m. Agate 60, Aavegotchi Lodge 2023. That one has not met quorum yet, 8.2 out of 9 million votes. And it looks like 89.98% in favor of funding the lodge. So yeah, that sums it up there. I guess I'll just backtrack a bit here for the re-rolls. When are we thinking? Once this passes, when are we thinking for survey? When are you think these re-rolls are going to happen?
We'll add it once the core prop has passed. We will add it. I think it did already pass, so we'll add it to our dev timeline. Does the community want them to happen in February? Let me look at the core prop here.
No, please. They're saying. Let's see. Maybe there's a date specified.
Was there any specific date specified?
There's no specified date. I guess this maybe, does it imply that it's kind of like after this is passed, we would just implement it? We would just like pick a day, or?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
We have to update the contract. We have to update the Gotchiverse UI to support both of those. So we can include this feature in our next sprint. We already have this sprint locked down for the next 2 weeks, but happy to include this feature for Gotchiverse UI in the next sprint.
Nice.
And we'll do the contract work as well. Shouldn't be too much.
Okay, excellent. Awesome. Core framework release is shipping from the Forge, so that's all good there. And that wraps up our proposal review. I think I'm going to kick off here with Dr. Wagme. He's in the house, so get him up here and we can talk about leadership in the DAO a little bit.
Hey, good morning.
GM.
Well, thanks. It's been a crazy week, feels like, in the DAO.
Man.
I don't think I've seen the DAO discussion thread ever be so busy. But we've got a ton of feedback, really valuable feedback from the community on our initial post about the DAO development team. And I think most people here in this audience have been pretty engaged in those discussions, or are kind of at least aware of what the initial proposal looked like. And synthesizing feedback, I think, is important. And some of the big takeaways with feedback have been that just like the scope of this DAO development team is enormous. Taking on a lot of things from like Forge work, which the Forge team was doing, to like operations and finance and community engagement. And it's just a really massive scope. And with the way that the proposal was written, it really kind of felt like it would exclude so many people from the community in contributing by taking on like what felt like way too big of a central role. And so I think what we've kind of got together and talked about it, and I think what us on the Forge team are really excited about is continuing Forge expansions, like working on the protocol, increasing revenue, like really kind of building product. And I'm really excited about launching the Forge. I think we're going to be able to drive some revenue, keep our community engaged, but I think we have so much more work to do to keep our current community engaged, to give us things to do in the protocol, whether that's like having evolving pets, or creating customized backgrounds, or creating pathways towards vanity wearables. like all these things are really fun and exciting, and I think will help keep our community here and give us a more attractive product for when we onboard people. And so kind of with that, I think we basically had an option to say, let's exclude all Forge work from a DAO development team and just kind of do that separately, or just take on Forge work that we're doing and see if the community would be interested in having kind of like a protocol product team, the Forge team stay on in that role. And I think I'm interested in the latter and just continuing to develop Forge and Forge expansions and engaging the community as much as possible from that perspective, and kind of narrowing down a proposal to a kind of a core team that's essentially like protocol product team. And that leaves a lot of space for other members in the community to lead efforts like community engagement. If you think about kind of like what like Hefe is doing and like what that role look like, that's a really big, huge responsibility. And you could have a big team just around that aspect. We could have a core team that worked on kind of like operations and finances, take a lot of Mikey's expertise and probably add some people who are intimately familiar with DeFi and its tools, and really help lay out like what the financial status of the DAO is, and probably help manage liquidity. So we could have a couple different core teams here, and I'm hoping to kind of take a step back and say this is like the Forge team and the protocol product that we would like to take on. And I'm hoping to hear from the community if you think that that makes more sense, if that would be taking kind of the skill sets of the Forge team and running with them to develop more product and kind of take a step back and not take on as many of those administrative roles and try to do too much and not leave space for the community. So hoping for feedback on that. I don't have anything written up yet, but I'd love to hear from you guys on that. And I think Mikey, I always appreciate his feedback too. Could come up stage and talk a little bit also.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a good conversation with Mikey the other day, also getting his thoughts on because he was one of the applicants, I believe, that we put forward with the DDT. So it's good getting his thoughts on everything, and gave us a good idea of how we could move forward. And I'm glad that you're going to be focusing on the Forge. I think that's something you guys are doing really well, and it's good to see the continued momentum with that. And so I think it's a good idea for the DAO to be funding like a product development team, especially for like a DAO native product development team coming in and building you guys understand their protocol and the whole kind of brand and vibe of Aavegotchi. So glad to hear that, and kind of looking forward to seeing what you guys as a team can accomplish over the next while, and looking forward to that. Yeah, let's get Mikey J. Let's get Mikey J up here. I don't see.
He said he might not want to come up on stage today if he didn't have too much to add. I think one specific point of feedback I'd hope from the community is so kind of with how I've defined things right there, that excludes a lot of what Mikey was going to do for the community from a finance and operations standpoint. And it's knowing Mikey really well. I know he has such an incredible amount to add to the community overall, and I think really defining like our operations and finance adds a lot of value, not just to like a Forge like protocol development team, but to all other teams who would come on. So if there was interest from the community, we could like Mikey could be like initially housed in the Forge team, but like take on a little bit scope of work that's outside of protocol product. But if we wanted to keep it like really tight in scope, just on like this is a protocol product team, then we would need to find a different way for like non-protocol product work to be housed. And then answer to Zico's point, I think I've been hoping that with the Forge we kind of lay a foundation for ways for people to engage, right? Like we're giving ourselves like some more tools, like for like how schematics work, how we can like break down alloy, have things in smaller chunks. I would love to fractionalize cores right? A godlike core is going to feel like so unattainable and expensive, but if we fractionalized godlike cores into 50 pieces, we could use those in gameplay as rewards, as arena rewards. And I really want to develop product that is something that people can get engaged with, like as early as they like click on Aavegotchi and start learning about it. Like, how can I get involved? And we need that. But I think we need some work to do to increase engagement. And I think a lot of the Forge in its current form is aimed at, sorry for the baby crying, is aimed at our current like highly engaged people. And I think an analogy I made on the DAO forums is like for Magic the Gathering, right? When they like have their new cards come out and they have like their new meta, that is aimed at really maintaining and engaging their current players and not onboarding new ones. And I think that that's what I view part of the Forge work doing is, sorry, there's a lot of toddler and baby in the background.
But I can't hear anything. I don't know about you guys. I can't hear.
Oh, you're okay.
Yeah.
No, that's not. It's my toddler and my baby. But
I know.
anyways, develop strong product for our current people, but I acknowledge we do need things that are more attractive for people to onboard with, and I want to focus work on that intentionally.
Yeah. What does the DAO think about, having other teams kind of coalesce around the DAO? I know Mikey mentioned maybe even a possible like ops or finance role team, but then also there's this, yeah, I mean, that's another way to do it. I thought maybe in the meantime, like this conversation's been going on for some time, and it seems like it might still take quite some time to get it sorted out. And what I would like to do in the meantime, and kind of see if the DAO is receptive to it, I kind of talked to Mikey J about it, was to possibly have a kind of D-work committee, at least to form a, to at least have some form of having the DAO review funding and, get a pathway of funding through D-work. And so that was one thing that I maybe thought I might want to focus a little bit of time on is maybe a D-work committee that would, not necessarily be leadership for the DAO, but would be able to handle kind of like the day-to-day operational stuff, like making sure they're keeping an eye on grants that are coming in. And, of course, there would have to be certain people that would have to be qualified to look at these things. But maybe some sort of committee tied to D-work could be an alternative just in the meantime while we're trying to figure out what this whole structure for the DAO could look like. It seems to be like a very complex topic with people with polarizing opinions on things, and might take some time to come to consensus on something that everybody is happy with. Yeah. I mean, I'm just so you guys know, I'm doing this DAO media stuff now. Like I'm writing these meetings. I'm doing the newsletter. I'm syncing up with Hardcore to make the Miro boards and whatnot. But I'm not really doing any PM work at the moment or anymore. I've kind of stepped away from the PM role overall, and so that does leave it does leave a void for somebody to come in there and take over that sort of work. But it is I can say firsthand, it is not probably a typical PM job, because there are many other aspects to it. And it quickly becomes a job that is too much for one person. And so that was the idea behind having the leads with specific roles. And, some of the feedback was the roles could be more specific, which, I agree. They could be more defined, without actually having people in place. And so that could be another approach, is that we go through the current model that we have put forth and just tighten up the scope for each position. I don't think there's any opposition to each one of those positions. More so the process of how we're going to get people in those positions. And so that could be one way we could approach this moving forward. And of course, the other way would, in my opinion, would be just a D-work committee for now. But curious to know your guys' thoughts on that.
I think for with the big like narrowing of scope, for to like just focus on protocol product, like just Forge expansions, we would probably like come with this team that I proposed, like with the Forge team doing Forge work, and leaving out a lot of like the other, uh, DAO development team that had those big roles. I don't think I was interested in like setting up a like complex hiring process for that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I would love, like, love to see other teams like coalesce and say, like, I am passionate about onboarding people. Like, we need people to play our game. Like, what does strong onboarding look like? And that could be both for developers and for people playing. And we'd have a team that's what they did and that's what they were good at. And we would like obviously work closely with them, right? I think a healthy DAO is going to have these like core teams that work really well together, that develop protocol product that is attractive to people that are checking out things for the first time and then helping explain that and then having a team that's dedicated to being good at that. And I think just we narrowed the scope a lot, and I wanted to probably keep the team that I know can execute on it and is familiar with the product that we're working on.
Yeah. And actually, much of the stuff that was put forward through the DDT plan could very well be taken care of just through different teams. Like, I'm going to be focusing my efforts, a lot of my efforts on GMI. I think we were doing a lot of good work with community engagement. We want to broaden our horizons in Web3 and connect with other communities, not just online, but in real life. And so I think we plan on having a fairly large presence at both those things, online and offline, this next year. So that's going to be really good for the DAO in terms of like getting Aavegotchi out there and having more presence. Um, and so, we could like have people coming with teams to the DAO to take care of some of these needed positions through their own, like in a more decentralized fashion. But yeah, it's kind of like this product lead, right? Instead of a product lead, you would have actually a team that the DAO works with, that does product development for the protocol. So I like the way people are seeing it. I like the way you see it there. And again, yeah, I don't have anything written in place. One thing I did want to bring up was the DAO media team and myself. We are currently, they have a little bit of runway left in terms of funding, but I want to make sure I get ahead of the curve and secure our funding, both for myself and the DAO media team. So we will put together a proposal just to make sure we can keep these meetings running till we figure out like these other positions if there's gonna be overlap. I don't think there is gonna be overlap. What we do is kind of specific for these meetings, but kind of open to hearing feedback. I'll get a discussion up there for that.
Happy, like that makes sense, right? We'd have like a core media team or a communications team, community team. I think like a lot of that has overlap. So like having a structure that this is our like community team that's going to focus on all those important things like what you're doing community facing, like onboarding, like media, like all of that could be housed in one team. Kind of like if the Forge team was doing protocol development, you would have this other core team taking on that work, which is so
Mm-hmm.
important for us to be successful. And I would love to see that develop with some structure, like what the roles were, like kind of like what the goals and like what that roadmap looked like. And I think you would find a ton of people that are super talented in the community that were interested in contributing, including a lot here in the chat, and guild leaders like Pearls.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's the right idea there, and in decentralized fashion, I think it works, but it will take some time to sort that out. I'll get some discussion going around that in the forums. But I appreciate what you've done so far, and I know it's not easy sometimes to be taking on so many different things. I was actually kind of thinking like, man, the Forge is going to be like a huge undertaking, and then with all these leadership things, I don't know if you're gonna have time for like a baby. It's like something's got to go, right? When you have so many different things, and I'm glad to see that there's focus on the Forge there, and we'll figure the other stuff out. with the leadership model. But basically, we're stepping away from the DDT model. We might use parts of it, but that'll be an ongoing discussion that we can put something together for next week. I'm just gonna read some questions, some comments in the chat here. Yeah, hardcore. You make a good point. I agree with that. We're not trying to make anything new out of a DAO Media crew. Dr. Wagme, is there interest in a 6-month period of hiring a protocol product team? Oh, it's like a vote.
Trying to make it a vote, but now I can't find the little Forge guy emoji, so I'm struggling.
Okay. Rickage, I think the project team should look like a project manager, managing project timelines, communication between parts of the team, reporting. Specialists depends on what the project is about, data analyst, DeFi expert, data modeler, artist, and so on. So that's kind of speaking to like a contributor or talent pool. Business analyst, so you have like a technical senior person that put things together for developers to develop and developers. Yeah.
So some feedback on that, like, we're pretty tight and lean as the Forge team right now. So I was the project manager, for that. And I think one of the nice things about if we have the Forge team, if we did this, we would probably have like 4 projects like running like simultaneously. And I think that would be like probably small enough for me to oversee those 4 projects. But in a perfect world where we're getting big and we're developing tons of product, we would probably need to like hire 1 or 2 like project managers to do exactly what you're saying. So that would be like something to consider in our like budget request, because project management is super important. And having an operational expert like Mikey would be really helpful in that, and we would like be using D-work, right? And for work that we can't do or is outside our scope, like this would be posted on the Forge team or development teams, or like the protocol product teams D-work, right? So we would be trying to get as much community building and feedback as possible to get as much out and completed using the skill sets in the community. And so, we have business analysts, like we have that, right? That's Mikey. Developers, like we have that. That's Diddley. And then we have our artist. It's like, that is exactly how that the team is already set up.
Yeah, it's a good point. We got Yannick up on stage here. Welcome, GM.
Good evening, Sears.
Good evening. You have some thoughts on maybe some DAO development structure or product team structure. I know we've talked a little bit, but kind of curious to know your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I'm here to talk a little bit about everything. First, I think I will start with Forge. I give it a hard time, so it's like easy to critique first version of the project. Of course, there was some downsides. So I just want everybody to know that I think in general it's a very good idea, and I would love to see Forge evolve, receive updates, and it's pretty cool model. I like it. So that's my own honest position. On the flip side, I think like before funding, like Forge is variables, right? Forge is just one of the parts from huge ecosystem, variables, gotchis, land, etc. So it seems like DAO want to take huge amount of money and fund variables development. Especially if you look into percentage, like how much we spend on games, arcades, Aavegotchi extensions. It's this spending so much of capital on variables only makes very little sense if you think as DAO. So my proposal would be to Dr. Wagmi or everybody who's thinking on DAO structure. Maybe we can put together first some framework, initial framework, how teams are competing, how ideas are competing. In first, I think we at least have 5 very developed ideas which we can propose and around which we can form a teams of people from community. There are like 56 people now. So, and I believe there are more than 5 nice projects within this group. So, for example, give an example, like, so with this way we can develop different branches, not only variables. For example, GMI can be really like responsible for putting out all information, being like independent media. I think DAO would love to have independent, not like media who can cover everything independently. Then you can have these game developers, like people who develop mini games. Then you have like Aavegotchi extension developers. Like I myself want to try extend the protocol with kinship mini game. So that's what I will want to contribute. So instead of farming one branch, why we not farm 5 different efforts with different directions? That's my main proposal regarding Forge related.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback. And I want to be clear, I want you to do that too. There's so much work to do, right? From the kinship perspective, like what are we doing with glitter? Like we need lots of teams like taking on a lot of different things and hopefully things that we're all passionate about, because I think that's what's going to keep people engaged, is find something you're excited about, you're passionate about, that you want to do the work on. And like that's why for the Forge team I would want to be like as clear as possible, like these are the projects we're working on, to like make sure we don't have like overlap or that we have some conflicts. Like if we were taking on tokenizing kinship as a project, that would mess up you working on kinship. So I think there needs to be a lot of clarity on what we're working on, and that would be part of what I would be bringing to this like Forge team, is like this is the roadmap of the things that we want to work on for the next 6 months. Like these are the projects, but like while doing that, I also want to get as much feedback from the community as possible. I don't know if it doesn't feel very decentralized for me to just say like these are the things we're going to do in the 6 months. I hope you like them. I want as much feedback and like helping triage or prioritize what to do. And I think other teams could be like, okay, the Forge team is going to work on backgrounds and they're going to work on vanity wearables. Like that leaves me room to work on these other projects. And I already have a team in place that has structure to take on some of these things. And so that's why I'm hoping to like move forward with it. And I am more hesitant to wait for 5 other teams to assemble themselves and put themselves together with the projects that they want to work on.
Sorry, it's not clear. Are you in support of splitting development budget for the next 6 months for 5 teams or not? It's not clear from your position.
I think I want multiple teams taking on projects. But like the budget I would be requesting would be just for the work that like me and my team were going to do, and then also would love to support other teams applying for funding to bring their product.
But money-wise, like I think you're asking, like if you compare to other projects, you're asking very high percentage of total spending. So it's otherwise, like if we want to find 5 projects like yours, like how much $1 million do we need? Like you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with paring this down, we're going to have a lot smaller budget request, just to be clear, because like our initial proposal was really expansive, right? And we were going to like try to own the grant application process. We were going to have a 75,000 ghost budget there, and I think that might be outside the scope of what we're hoping to do with protocol products. So we were going to really get that budget down. We were going to reduce our own individual like requests because our work is going to be smaller. So if there's support for this from the community, it's going to be a lot smaller budget request.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
just looking.
That's like my only main concern was. Otherwise, I really support your job. I really like what you're doing. Sorry if sometimes I'm a little bit like straightforward.
No, I like it, and I just really appreciate your feedback. And whatever we can do to get people like you excited and building, we have to do it. And I just really don't want people to feel like there's not room to contribute. That's antithetical to like what we're all trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I like the idea of having multiple teams building. Golden Cross just dropped a really interesting chart, and actually, you did drop something like this during one of the guild summits as well, which I thought was really interesting, showing how GMI could be an entity handling specific campaigns and events in the Gotchiverse or outside of the Gotchiverse. You have the Forge team who's a product development team on the protocol. You could have a different team that comes up with another really sought after protocol feature that we need, and maybe they're working on that, and then they can get a separate budget request. And the cool thing about DWork is we can create workspaces for all of our teams, and so you don't have to cross over your work with someone else's work, and you can even make spaces private. So DWork does allow for this structure that Golden Cross has put up there. Is actually, it works really well with DWork, and there's a way to nest spaces for each of these divisions within the main Aavegotchi DWork. And there's even ways to make things private. We don't always want to share every detail of our project, and so there's ways to make certain things private as well. So this model here would work quite well with if we were to say we're going to run with something like this. And I think we are already kind of functioning this way as a DAO, to have these different divisions within the DAO. Coder Dan mentioned sub DAOs, which I think could be an evolution of this someday, is to have actually have voting members sitting within these divisions once these organizations evolve and have this ecosystem of sub DAOs. But right now, a lot of them are like subgroups within the DAO. No voting or real autonomy there. But I could see that being.
And when I say sub DAO, I really just mean a group of people doing stuff. Doesn't have to be a DAO structure. Could just be like we have with the Forge team, where we have Dr. Wagme as kind of the PM, and then more technical members. Doesn't have to be like an actual DAO.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And we treat this very seriously because it is real money on the line here. But all of us have played MMORPG games, and everybody in here, I'm sure if you've played some of these games, you're familiar with factions. There are factions in these games, and some of them have aligning interests, some of them don't, but they're all building on top of these games, trying to accomplish some sort of a goal, whether it's acquiring resources or taking control of a certain aspect of the game, like certain part of the game, land wise, or they're these factions within these games. And I could see that being like Aavegotchi is a game too, right? So like, why not have these different factions that are building out specific things on the protocol, or delivering something in a media sense, or group engagement, or having a dev group that's organized by somebody. I could totally see these being a thing, and it seems like the natural way you would go with like a MMORPG style game. And I have Yannick up here. While I have you, you're pretty deep in Orden GG, which is another very complex on-chain. It's an on-chain game. Do you guys have guilds in it's not coming to me now.
It's Dark Forest.
Dark Forest. That's right. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have guilds or factions in Dark Forest? And is there some sort of like groups building on top of Dark Forest? How do they function on their protocol?
During whole Dark Forest gameplay, only 2 guilds were formed naturally, and we form like rivals, like counterparties. That is Orden GG and DevDAO. What I have discovered from like all my experience playing in guild and fighting against DAO, that it is, as a guild, we actually think a bit differently. Like that's why I'm a big proponent to putting responsibility, not individuals, not having one team and 5 roles, but having 5 teams, 5 logos instead. Because when we are formed into guild, we are thinking a little bit differently. First of all, you can coordinate as you want, right? It's like inside your guild, you are your own manager, your own boss. So it's very comfortable. And our psychology is making us like fight for our tribe, like fight for our logo, fight for our reputation, etc. So I found it very fascinating how you don't need this corporate structure, you don't need Scrum, etc. You simply can coordinate just based on guild. So it worked pretty well for Dark Forest. We are able, like, because of this, like guild rivalry, guild versus guild, we were able to attract many people for both sides. Like people were either for DAO or help them or help us. So everybody by the end of the round, each person like picked the side or helped. And if they felt like there is some disbalance between two sides, they were like, when we were winning too much, they were helping DAO. So it's fascinating. So these competitions, they are making people going. They're making people think different ideas how to win. And if you to win, you need to create a plugin. You basically receive like free development for your game from the people, from the players. So I have very positive, like, to summarize, I have really positive experience. And I built right now. I'm built some kind of like guild framework, because to like put this like experience into some framework, because it's not clear. There is not so many guilds for this on chain games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I'm open to hearing in the future more about that guild framework and what you guys are working on. I do agree with many of your points that you made there, with having these. They could even be competing groups within Aavegotchi, bidding on specific jobs or things that need to be built on the protocol. So, and the good thing is we do have many Aavegotchi native guilds in the game, and they do have significant builders within them that have contributed great things to our protocol. So, those were just some of my thoughts. We didn't have anything kind of officially on paper, but basically. I really like Golden Cross's chart there. It does kind of exemplify how I've been thinking about this, and the foundation treasury is going to be a huge step forward with probably enabling this sort of this sort of structure within Aavegotchi DAO. Do we have any? Actually, I have you up here, Yannick. The next topic does kind of address you. You have a proposal, not a proposal, sorry. You have a discussion active right now regarding kinship burn ideas. And so I kind of wanted to talk to you about kinship burn. What is your thoughts around in general? What kinship burn? What is the purpose of burning kinship? And maybe some ideas that you had put in the forums around maybe making kinship something fun in the game.
There were like a lot of discussions. I discussed it invested a lot of time exploring this subject over the last few months. And basically, the two most promising branches of this idea are, first one, we can use this burning mechanic, kinship burning mechanic, to stabilize our economy, meaning when, for example, there were a bear market, and we simply didn't have any releases or anything. So during this time, we can kind of slow down your economy by making channeling more expensive. So that's first use case, and when the time is good again, when you need kind of speed up the game, speed up the economy, you can just set it to 0 and it will be like 1x speed again. So that's my main idea. You can kind of control the inflow of base economy, because UBI is a base inflow. All the rest Alchemica was based from UBI. And second idea is to actually use kinship to onboard, sorry, not onboard, but yeah, onboard also, but to give kinship to different games. For example, right, if we implement kinship burn, and it will be minus one kin on channeling in Gotchiverse. We can implement that each time. We can implement that kinship is going to Gotchiverse balance. Like it is like a token. It's decreasing from Gotchi, but going to the game. And you can treat all the games the same. So you can use kinship as a token of like engagement. Which game receives the more kinship game receive, the more attractive it is, the more people are give kinship to that game, and they're burning kinship in that game, meaning they kind of like transfer small amount of value. It's not big, right? If you look at number, it's not big. Kinship not worth so much. But this way we can make games compete for engagement, and we create the mechanic which will encourage engagement. And in the end of the day, these games can simply exchange kinship back to Ghost, meaning the more game is engaging, the more funding it will receive. So just to summarize, like one way is to stabilize economy and have control, because we need to control UBI. UBI is expensive, so I think we need it anyway. It's like just the best way to fix this problem. And second way, just to reward to find the most playable mechanics and games. So way to like kind of fund small transaction games.
Yeah, you're touching on a really important point here, because I know one of the things you'd mentioned, Coder Dan, is it would be great for the protocol to find ways where kinship and XP would translate across other games in some way. And maybe this could be one possible way. So kind of want to know, what are your thoughts on kind of Yannick's idea of burning the kinship, but you're not technically burning it. It's a transactional thing where it would go towards a game or towards an experience. And we would actually be able to track that as a metric of how much literal, kinship, how much love that game's actually getting. And maybe there's some sort of other funding or reward tied to that.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting idea. I think obviously it does kind of add a layer of complexity for a game trying to get players. Like they might only get players that are not willing to, or are willing to sacrifice their kinship. So my initial thought would be that it could like limit adoption of that game just because it's an additional barrier to entry. But for certain types of games, maybe it could be appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, my personal thoughts on this were, I really like the idea of the kinship burn, but perhaps this would go along well paired with like a kinship potion that was available. And so then there could be a win-loss where, you can play this game, you're going to burn some kinship towards the game, but if you're skillful or you're able to achieve something specific in the game, you have a chance at getting this kinship potion and potentially earning more kinship back than what you initially burned. Initially contributed.
I agree with potions, by the way, but just to answer Coder Dan's concern, it must be not like you can spend really little kinship. Like you can create very simple game. Maybe you will earn like 5 kinship, but this microtransaction will allow you will receive like $5. And you can iterate once again, and etc. Meaning you don't have to do it in big chunks. That's the beauty of this model. It's like microfinancing the games, the creation of the games. And you can like put like 10,000 goals for reward and say like during the next months you can exchange kinship from this pool, and you can like you literally like put 10,000 into seeking mechanics and game development. I think it's a beautiful mechanic.
Okay. Okay, I'm just reading some of I agree with you. It is an interesting mechanic. I'm just reading some of the comments here. Let's see.
As it relates to spending kinship to channel, I know you guys were talking about it costing maybe one outcome, one kinship per channeling. Is that have people brought up downsides to that? Is there general support for that proposal, or are there some downsides that are still being discussed? Because I know you tried before it. I think it was -2, and that one failed. So you're going to retry it with -1.
I think in general people don't like any nerf. So if we simply even go lower, because you need at least -1 to activate the game, like otherwise we don't see anything. So I think if we release elixirs or other kind of kinship compensation, we can pass it. But I'm not sure. I really discuss it with Walt. I'm not sure what is their position.
I know from the Gotchiverse side, we have definitely talked about having potions and are actually currently working on that very feature. Now they're not kinship or XP potions because those are protocol level. It would require a vote, but if there is interest in the DAO for starting to add like kinship or XP potions as for example, like dropped items if you kill an enemy in the game, like a turkey, or currently it's turkeys and pumpkins, but later we'll have more enemies. There could be a kind of an RNG that is decided. This is where it kind of gets tricky because to do it in an absolutely trustless way, it's not ideal if the Gotchiverse server side is deciding when that potion is dropped. It's better if it's done on chain. But the technology for doing that is like that. You have to basically use like ZK snarks for that, and your game has to be very simple. So we haven't really gotten the technology for that ready yet. Hopefully in the future we will have that, but assuming that the potions are not dropped on chain in a way that is absolutely decentralized and trustless, if the Gotchiverse is dropping potions, and we could publish the formula that we're using and all of that. Is that something that the DAO is interested in adding at this point, or we want to have more discussion on it?
In adding kinship potions as a drop, as like a random, like an RNG drop.
Yeah, pretty much kinship and then XP. And just so imagine the scenario, right? That we have like this King of the Hill style arena where we fight to death and last person wins. So they might be able to get like a potion for that. It could also be a scenario where you have these pretty difficult enemies to kill, and players actually pay like an entry fee to fight the battle. And if they're able to just defeat the boss, then there would be like a potion drop. So it's kind of like a dungeon, except it's not like multiple levels. It would just be kind of one level for now, but later could be expanded. But yeah, the idea is just having potions as reward for like killing bosses.
Yeah, like I'd be into that for sure. And I think that would make more sense if we were to pair that with like a kinship burn proposal, because now it's not like burning kinship into the void. Now there's a possibility of earning your kinship back somehow,
yeah, so it could be a kinship. Yeah, kinship could be like one of the ways to do an entry fee.
I mean, like entry fee into the arena, maybe. That would be interesting. To burn, you're burning a kinship to get into the arena, but then there's also this opportunity if you slay like a boss, or there's a turkey that shows up and you kill it, maybe it drops a potion, maybe that makes it worth it. So
it's it's just a little bit weird to have it as kinship because it's not really related on chain. The arena is kind of an off-chain thing, kinship is an on-chain thing, and it's difficult to kind of bring them together in a way that makes sense. I mean, we could just have it say you have to burn one kinship before we let you in. It's a bit like almost unnecessary to do it that way, though.
Is there any other way we can distribute kinship potions otherwise than arena?
No one's saying the arena is the only way, but do you mean what do you mean by that?
I just mean if we take kinship from people and say 100% will be compensated in form of the potions anyway. For example, to start, you can, but now you have a problem how to redistribute it through the game fairly. So arena is one way. I just thinking if there is maybe some other way. Maybe they should be craftable. What effect it will have? Some other options, because you say arena is not good, so maybe there is on-chain option.
I mean, if you could do a kinship raffle where you basically say, I'm gonna put in so and so amount of kinship, and we're gonna do one VRF every 24 hours or something, and whoever wins that kinship raffle would get a kinship potion. That would be one way to do it on chain. I was thinking you could do the same thing for if you wanted to spend a bunch of kinship at once. Maybe you could enter that into like an Alchemica, some sort of like VRF Alchemica raffle. So the same thing, it would just be instead of getting a kinship potion, you could get some Alchemica instead.
VRF is good because we have this two-layer model, and in one way, like first people are deciding for themselves if they want spend kinship or not. This is like first step, and the second step you have a redistribution of the all kinship from people who decided to spend. So it's little board will be people will have different strategies. It will be very interesting. I think it's a good idea.
Aavegotchi makes a good point here regarding kin potions. The problem with kin potions is that it is value dependent on the user. A 50 kinship gotchi is worthless, and then as you go up the kinship leaderboard, it becomes increasingly more valuable. If it makes the difference between 1 and 2, then the value is immense. I brought up a cap before that a potion that is dropped in the gotchiverse can't raise kinship beyond 1,000 kin. This way, it can be dropped to regain some of the lost kin without interfering with the economy. However, the cap is kind of arbitrary, will need to be adjusted. Yeah, I agree. Every now and then, so it is a less elegant solution. Maybe Phantasma might have brought up a different solution once where the potion would give a fractional kinship, and the higher the gotchi's kin is already, the less it would increase. That would be interesting, but it sounds like it might be complicated to implement something like that.
So you're saying it would actually get lower so if I have like 950 kinship, couldn't we just say this potion gives you 10% more kinship, and the cap is 1,000, so anything over 1,000 would just be cut off. So it would basically bring you up to 1,000. Or if you use it on a gotchi with 900 kinship, you would get the full 90 because it would bring you up to 999 or 990 actually.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking more in the sense that if your gotchi's kinship is the higher the gotchi's kinship is already, the less it would increase. So, if you had 100 kinship points, it would be a sliding scale, so that if you have a 50 kinship gotchi, you would get that full 100 kinship. But as you move up the scale, as you get closer to that cap, whatever amount that is, arbitrarily, if we say 1,000, once you get to that 1,000, then maybe the kinship potion may not do as much for your gotchi, but would still be valuable on the market to somebody who did have a lower kinship, because they would make more use of that. They would get more of that kinship from their potion with a lower kinship gotchi than something that's higher, closer to the cap. I think that's what this is suggesting here.
Definitely an interesting idea. I don't think this is a pointless discussion. I mean, it is an interesting discussion as it relates back to the larger goal, which is basically adding in a little bit more of a choice for choosing between kinship for your alchemical channeling or kinship for other things. So I think there is a good discussion here, and it is worth discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. I did
Yeah.
want to touch on this today, but I think we've discussed it, decent amount. Maybe we'll follow up on it. And I don't know, Yannick, is there going to be some sort of a proposal on your suggestion here, or are you going to go back and iterate on it before you get something out there?
Yeah, as I have mentioned, let's discuss other subject, but I will continue work on this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on our bonding curve discussion. Give people a chance if they do have any specific questions regarding where we're going with this bonding curve. You guys laid out a really good plan for moving away from the curve. It's well laid out in your DAO discussion there. But I want to give people a chance. I know there's been a lot of discussion around it. So if there are questions specific to the bonding curve, you can either request to come up here and speak, or you can put them in the chat there. One of the questions I had personally was, once we move away from this bonding curve, what is the DAO currently thinking about what asset we're going to be storing our DAI in? Because if the underlying threat is DAI, like the DAI depegging, then we still haven't technically moved away from the threat just by turning off the bonding curve, because the DAI could still be potentially subject to, the depeg, and then we're still kind of in the same boat, even though we went through all this process for getting off the bonding curve.
Yeah, that's interesting because it addresses the other side. There's been a lot of focus on Pixelcraft, and it's kind of become an audit of Pixelcraft, and we're fine with that. But the other part is, no matter where the DAI goes, it's got to go somewhere. And then if we're in agreement that there is a risk there, then you want to have risk diversification. And I know Yannick's on the call here. We had a brief back and forth about what does that mean. One way would be just to pick a better asset. You just pick one asset that everybody agrees is definitely superior and definitely safe. But typically when you use the word diversification, it means there's a multiplicity, there's a lot of options. And so when you go to fund management, those kind of things, typically you get a number of assets that you break out into. And not just assets, but you break into assets across multiple verticals, or depends what you're in. We're in crypto, so at Pixelcraft, I can say we haven't had a final commitment yet, but we've had a number of ideas we've gone through on what this could look like and spent a lot of time on it. And in a nutshell, it's like this: it's a variety of stables. So your USDC, a little bit of DAI remains, and then also maybe a little USDT. But then also some blue chips like Ether and Matic. And what you'll notice is then also it goes across not just one chain. So it's also about being multi-chain, because if the validators ever go down on whatever chain you're on, God forbid, you want to be basically diversified in that way too. So it's diversification of assets and a diversification of where they are. So we'd be on layer 1, we'd have another significant percentage, probably the greatest percentage on Polygon, makes sense. And then we're even considering maybe a third chain. We have 2 proof of POS chains. Why not go with a proof of work chain like Bitcoin, and maybe move a bit there where we could still be transparent, everybody could see it, and it would be completely separate from whatever's going on in the EVM ecosystem. You'd basically have this true diversification across not just assets, but platforms that host those assets. And so that's the way we're kind of thinking about it. And obviously the cool thing about the DAO is you guys may come up with a totally different approach, but that is certainly the kind of mindset we're at with if we're to take custody of a certain amount of these DAI, we want to be very serious about diversifying them in every way we can.
Yeah, great response there. Looking at some questions, Dr. Wagme, would Polygon help with an OTC deal for Matic to diversify the treasury?
Maybe. I think Matic's very liquid though. I don't think we would need to bother them with that. I mean, I haven't checked the liquidity recently, but I think it's probably pretty good.
My instinct
But
is
maybe.
it's the deepest, so should be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, Choina. It's a good case for using our weighted voting that we implemented recently. And that would be one of the votes, I think, something that DAO would have to decide there. That's why I wanted to bring it up today, because everybody in crypto seems to have a different opinion on what's the best asset. And so,
But
I'm personally a Bitcoin Mac. Like, I love Bitcoin, but other people I know don't like Bitcoin and like Ether or, one of the other ones. So it's, you know, everybody has their own opinions there.
is there already consensus on a curve split? Is we decided because we are speaking percentages of diversification? Did we already confirmly decided? Do you have majority support for that decision?
I mean, we haven't made the SIG prop for it yet. There's been a lot of conversation about it. Seems like there may be another proposal made by another community member. We're going to probably continue forward with our initial numbers, and we do welcome other competing proposals. This is for option 2. For option 1, there's no real need to have. The SIG prop number 1. There's no real need to have a competing proposal for that. It's basically just yes or no. So we are planning to put out a SIG prop later this week for turning it off and also the proposed split.
Yeah, I would just add that the second SIG prop, the one that actually is about how to handle the DAI funds if the curve turns off, is currently set up on our side where it's very, very binary, very simple. Either the proposal we're putting forward and we've made our case and the reasons for that, or choose something else, which literally is saying go back and let's see if there's a better way that somebody else can come up with. And so it leaves a lot of room for alternatives.
There is one big downside in killing curve in sense that we are losing this nice deep liquidity pool, like $20 million, and we will have this much smaller, like if DAO will give away liquidity, we'll have much volatile ghost, and Gotchiverse will be much more volatile itself.
Yeah.
So
I don't disagree on the volatility. Definitely could be bigger than it currently is. I do have some news about liquidity though, which is we've been talking with QuickSwap. So there's a couple options for liquidity. One of the leading ones would be QuickSwap, which we already have very established relationship with. We have one of their biggest customers in terms of liquidity. So they do have a new V3 liquidity management kind of platform. It's powered by this provider called Gamma. I think it's Gamma. Find the name here. It's just called Gamma, I think. I don't know if some of you guys might have heard of it. Basically, it's more like the Uniswap V3 model, where liquidity is used much more efficiently, and this Gamma platform basically manages all the liquidity on QuickSwap for liquidity providers. Because if you're familiar with V3, like you have to constantly move your position around based on where the price is. So the upside is you can have much deeper liquidity on basically wherever the price currently is at that moment, compared to a V2 where it's where the providers have like the much higher impermanent loss risk. And they did, when they touched on impermanent loss, there's essentially two types of pools. One is the narrow range. So that would be basically saying we're only going, if Ghost is $1.20, we're going to provide liquidity for 120 to 130. That would be like the narrow range, which they said collects more fees, but there's also more impermanent loss if it goes out of that range. And then you have the wide range, which gives less fees, but has less impermanent loss. So the wide range probably seems more appropriate for something like a DAO treasury. But Gamma sounds very powerful as far as like managing liquidity. And I think it could actually turn out that we have the same depth of liquidity as we have currently on the curve, with like much lower actual liquidity in terms of funds invested.
I think what you're saying,
we're
Dan,
just, I don't want to say that the DAO has to use QuickSwap. That's up to the DAO. I'm just giving you guys options. There's also a balancer. We're also exploring potential how things could work with them as well. But we're not going to dictate to you guys how that liquidity should be managed.
well, put another
Just
way,
gonna
is
give
we're doing our
options.
homework for if we have our side, we may also be contributing to liquidity, right? So we're also looking into this deeply on our behalf and for the rest of Aavegotchi. So there may be other options out there we're not aware of, but two that we have definitely done our homework on are QuickSwap. We're interfacing with them, and Balancer also. They are really positioning themselves to be a DAO treasury kind of. That's what they want to be known for and what they want to support. And there's a lot of rewards there to do it. I think the other interesting part about all this is no matter which option or options we go with, Yannick, you make a good point. We lose that deep liquidity, but it's if you look at the curve, it's 3 years old, and DeFi moves so fast with innovation. It's basically V1 type of pools, and what we're talking about now is there's just room for so much more efficient fund management, and you could literally fund like a passive income back to the DAO on a pretty significant scale by going with something like Balancer, which the contracts are 2.5 years old, so it's not as new and fancy as the V3 on QuickSwap, but it's secure, and the rewards are strong. And so the cool thing is we might be able to, have the best of both worlds, or have a multifaceted access where, nothing's 20 million DAI deep. There's no pool that deep, but there's 3 or 4 pools that are all deep enough, and that could be really, really powerful. Especially when we consider the DAI curve. The ghost curve is behind a KYC wall. That is very limiting for adoption. And so there's a lot to consider here. There's a ton of moving parts. It really isn't simple, but I totally hear you on, the volatility side, and consider, is it going to be a problem if we don't have that deep liquidity available on the curve? And the more I look into it, the less concerned I am about it, I guess, is my current take on it, or my evolving take on it.
Also, I will ask you the same question I asked Dr. Wagmi. Like with your economical proposal, you requested like 8 out of, probably, please fix me if I'm wrong, like 26 million DAO has, roughly, if we calculate. So we requested 8 million. Like, this is like absolutely your like position, or are you willing to, given that it's like big percentage from money of DAO, are you willing to a little bit lower your request and build like on lower budget? I understand like you are everything we have, like without Pixelcraft we have no development, and you are in this position, but it's like I would rather I would rather have a little bit more liquidity, at least a few million more, and a little bit more stability, and be a little bit more conservative with development.
Yeah, I hear you on that. We could well, there's the way it's structured now, just to be clear, is there's 20%. We also agree liquidity is critical, so that's why we set aside 20% has to be earmarked for liquidity no matter what. And then of the 40% earmarked for Pixelcraft, we're also using X amount for liquidity on both DEXs and centralized solutions. We're going to support in any way we can. And then the foundation has 40% that, could also, it's up to you guys. You want to do more or go to more platforms. I mean, at the end of the day, there's no limit on how much can go to liquidity from all 3 parties. We're just making sure at least at a minimum 20% is earmarked for that. So there's that part. And as Coder Dan said, we've put a lot of thought into this. We've made our case, and as of now, I haven't seen, a reason to change the current proposal. And I guess what I'd say on that is the whole adage of never put your eggs in one basket and risk diversification. It keeps coming back to that, and being able to know that no matter what, there are three major multi-sigs at a minimum in charge of significant parts of the curve. So there's the foundation, there's a different multi-sig or a different part of the DAO that steps up. That needs to be done relatively soon, and I haven't seen any conversation around it. Who would handle that 20%? And then Pixelcraft. And the reason it's 40% is from, among other things, we can put it to work, and we have that track record of doing it. And one of the precursors we kind of looked at is the circle of win, going back to previous NFT primary sales and all of that. That was very similar, where it's 40-40 and then a rewards pool. Here it's 40-40 and a liquidity pool. So there's precedent, there's safety and diversification, and there's an opportunity here to just instead of having passive DAI, we don't know. Unfortunately, the jury's out on what the foundation will do with it, and I haven't seen that change over the last 10 days. If it had, and there was a clear plan, and there was an infrastructure in place, it might be different. But I think it would be very risky if the more that goes away from Pixelcraft, unfortunately, I see it as a greater risk. I'd prefer if none of it went, and there was like 10 teams building 10 awesome games, and all we had to do was set up Gotchi Chain. That would actually be a great day for me. But I hope you hear what I'm saying. Like we need to make sure that when it closes, there's liquidity and there's things being developed in a big way, at a bigger scale than before. So that's my thoughts on it.
I'm just reading some of the comments here. I see Zerk is on stage. See your comment there. Can we just vote on number one question for the week, to turn the curve off or not? There seems to be room for discussion about what to do if it is turned off, including splits, which we're talking about now. Yeah, I mean, do you have, like, it seems like we're heavily, to not turn off the curve would seem like we're sitting ducks at that point. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the majority of the DAO feels like the turning off the curve is in the best interest of the DAO. But Zerk, you are on stage also, so if you would like to chime in, feel free.
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. GM everyone, and thanks for
GM.
having me on the stage. If time permits, I wanted to also touch on the topic that I made on the forum recently. But since we're at it, I think like one of the discussions were about that, if to, instead of like handing in this 40% directly, whether to have specific targets that are meant to be met by the Pixelcraft, let's say in terms of the development of the Gotchiverse. Let's say when a certain target is met, maybe instead of handing in the 8 million, I think it was the 40% of it, rather than hand it in quarterly fashion. So I saw that there was maybe some room for discussion in that regard, and also what to do with when the split is done, what to do with the individual splits. So yeah, that's why I thought maybe like next week it could be just better to just vote on it and continue discussions revolving around how to essentially make this money put to work.
All right.
Yeah, because the topic is maybe somehow related that I can quickly touch upon. We have seen the new roadmap put out, but then it's clear that the Pixelcraft hasn't lost its touch in any means to innovate and then have this broader perspective that is very innovative that we all believe in. Therefore, allocating our time on a Sunday here. But then the Gotchiverse part was like just basically touched upon in a paragraph for certain promised futures without any specific targets, whether all of them would be in 2023 or later, which is fine because I can imagine sometimes putting too hard of time restrictions can be a little counterproductive, and there can be other developments that just may delay things. And I understand that you guys may not want to put a lot of very hard constraints, but I thought that the Gotchiverse might actually adapt to a new phase than last year, because last year was the alpha, right? There was the tests, the installations went live, the channeling, and the farming. But I see in 2023, Pixelcraft made face two different challenges, one being the onboarding and tied to it being the Gotchiverse turning into a more polished product rather than, let's say, the minimum viable product, right? So I'm thinking in this, like in most of this crowdfunded games, you see this monthly, let's say, the development logs of patches, so to say, and then the mechanics, for example, are explained in a clear fashion, and then people can discuss about it. And I think this would be beneficial in multiple aspects. One being there's like less pressure on Pixelcraft about what like developments are going in the development part, as the DAO is part of it naturally. Actually even more invested fashion, since we're like the asset owners also. And I think also it's going to prevent a lot of inefficient discussions for future, especially when it comes to, so to say, arena balancing, as it was discussed yesterday. There will be quite heated discussions already in games where there's just a leaderboard, no money incentive, no bags involved, right? So we wanna avoid them as much as possible, and personal grievances and attacks. And therefore, I thought it could be quite useful also to adapt this rather detailed implemented mechanics in small bits being published as a log, rather than just like this wall of text that welcomes you when you enter the Gotchiverse. And therefore, we can keep track changes, and then there will be room for discussion. Right now, one thing I think it's lacking is really that there's no dedicated space in Discord also to discuss about Gotchiverse that much. There's bugs. There's DAO discussion, but DAO has so many parts moving. I feel like it's not quite the place for sometimes discussing about the Gotchiverse related stuff. And Arena is definitely going to start taking up much more space. And I think beyond the there was no exactly like a development log between the two Arena versions, right? So it was like the first time Arena launched, I played 4 hours nonstop. It was a blast, honestly. But the second time, there were still some things that were not quite clear in terms of mechanics and so. And this, I think, is one of the things that can really drive away the players if you don't get like a good feedback on what you're doing in a game. So I think to really help with Gotchiverse being more polished and then having these onboarding and so on, I think this would be quite useful. And then some in the same respect, maybe since the Pixelcraft is the developer of the Gotchiverse on the Aavegotchi protocol, I thought maybe there could be, since this is kind of like, I talk honestly because it was kind of laid out in a way that was stated that the Pixelcraft doesn't really need this money to necessarily maybe develop or necessarily to fund people or so, but it would definitely help, it's also kind of clear. And I thought if it could be somehow thought of in a way that in the Gotchiverse, maybe DAO raises in its voice in a more clear fashion what the priorities are. People expect, let's say, maybe there's more like a metaverse feature that is requested. So let's say maybe a lodge is important because people complain right now there's not much to do, to be honest, in the Gotchiverse, like in terms of social interactions and so. And then maybe after that kind of prioritization, maybe it's shipped by the Pixelcraft upon the request, and then maybe it's kind of like a bounty kind of model that Pixelcraft makes that, and then this is subsequent money is like transferred accordingly. So this was just one tight discussion I think could be to curve as well. But in general, I think it would be quite useful if you had this release logs in a much more detailed fashion, which would eventually lead to Gotchiverse Bible chapters as well, so that it's not just collecting dust. So that's my train of thought.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts. And one of the main points there that I think was repeatedly made that I'm hearing from you, in your opinion, is there could be better channels of communication both ways between Pixelcraft and the DAO, and what the DAO would like to see built and what Pixelcraft is currently building or is currently shipping. And so that seems to be something I've seen in the forums quite a bit this week. Like you're raising this concern here as well, that we're moving away from the curve. There's going to be some allocation of the curve going to Pixelcraft, and there should be better communication between not only Pixelcraft but also the DAO communicating with Pixelcraft and actually giving better feedback to Pixelcraft. I think both ways maybe. But curious to know thoughts. what people think about what Zerk just kind of put out there.
Yeah, I would say in the initial phase of the project, we did do a kind of a monthly review of the month, and actually we still do that. We put out like a this month in Aavegotchi post every month. I guess that is, I'm hearing that generally people don't feel like that's enough to be kind of clear about what the next upcoming priorities for the next month are. I mean, we're if you want more details on like granular dev things, we can do that. Like, what changes did our backend team make to the Gotchiverse this month?
Yeah. I think
we
going
have
forward,
we have like all the Jira tickets and everything. It wouldn't be too difficult to basically what we do generally is we take all the public facing Jira tickets and we turn those into the Gotchiverse logs. There's a ton of like non-public facing features every 2-week sprint that get into the Gotchiverse. A lot of it is stuff that's not even it's a lot of prep for things that are going to happen the month down the line sometimes. So obviously those are not going to go in because there's some things we want to. I mean, we do want to have some things as a surprise for you guys. We don't if we literally tell you everything we're working on all the time, there's no way to have surprises. So
Yeah,
there's a kind of a balance there as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think also the forum post really mainly concerns the Gotchiverse developments. Like I love seeing these like fake gotchas came out of nowhere, right? And it was a blast. Honestly, I'm personally a huge fan of fake gotchas as well, as you guys may know. And I think the important thing is though, as you have been prioritizing shipping so many things, I think the Gotchiverse needs its own kind of special attention in this regard, especially with like gameplay mechanics. Like really is even if it's just like something introduced is not really explained, and the user always has to kind of like fight to find out what does exactly what, this kind of uncleared or discrepancy in the expectations and the gameplay. I think this can really hurt in the arena part or in the Gotchiverse. It would also just like introduce this vote of confidence also from. I mean, obviously we're aware that you guys are not like abandoning Gotchiverse or anything, but I think it would just be to have these features shipped a little more detailed, explained monthly, so to say, would help a lot and clarify mechanics, eventually becoming chapters in the Gotchiverse Bible. So yeah, I mean, this was my way of thinking. Otherwise, I love the alpha and then the surprises that I don't want to spoil for anyone.
Zerk, I appreciate your feedback. I think the way you put it forward and the way you describe it makes a lot of sense. You mentioned the Gotchi Bible, and I've been surprised personally how much that's come up this week in some ways. I mean, I know it's been a while since we've issued a chapter for the Bible, but in another way, it's because of the nature of the beast, where we're building Web3 games in Web3 ways, where the arena and the PvP is something that we've been building with you guys, like in a very back and forth way. And I guess what Zerk you're saying is it's not very useful if we don't have the numbers to work with, because there's a lot of people in the DAO that are talented and able to actually read the data and then put it to work, or the more techie side of it, as opposed to just going out a type form with some feedback on how the experience was also valuable.
Yeah.
So I hear that part. And then I think maybe while Gotchi Bible's up, like we've had some internal conversations this week about that and why to us, it was like self-evident why we haven't shipped one, because we're doing this PVB back and forth. There's no need to issue a Bible chapter on that yet. But while we're on the topic real quick, Dan, do you want to just address Bible in terms of, the way we think about it and make sure maybe we're all on the same page with that? Because it's obviously something that everybody cares about.
Yeah, so Gotchiverse Bible, there's in the initial versions of it, like the initial chapters, a lot of that was at a phase where we were pretty much saying this is released. There might be bugs in it. We're kind of opening it up for the community to review and give feedback on, especially on the farming side. And you guys did a great job kind of co-piloting that with us, and ended up with a very nice final product. So going forward, we do have my headphones are going to be out of battery here in a sec, but so you guys can hear me. So we have the liquidators, the great battle. Those are kind of the two main things that are still on the main like Gotchi verse Bible list. Yeah, you guys can hear me okay?
Yeah,
Wanna
you're
make
still
sure.
coming through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I lost one headphone. The other one's still going. So we just don't want to put something out until we're like 70-80% of it is confirmed on our side, because if we put something out and it's going to change dramatically, there's no real point to putting that out. And there's all those items are mentioned in the roadmap. So as we get closer to figuring out exactly like how those are going to work in terms of mechanics and confirming those, having the spec docs written, which we are currently doing. We have an entire G drive full of all the different spec docs that we've written.
Yeah,
but we don't want to
sure.
put something out that's like that we're not ready to say like this is how we think it's going to work.
Yeah, I absolutely understand and agree with that notion. But maybe I can give like maybe a little more specific example to clarify. I'm not personally really concerned with like lack of Gotchiverse Bible chapters at this moment, because some of them has this broad future perspective that we envision for the Gotchiverse. But let's say the melee dash was kind of like, let's say, OP according to data, and then the next iteration, let's say it gets nerfed. Let's say the range is halved, right? So if this kind of iterations don't kind of like make into a document that we see and understand what has changed, you won't be able to track these changes. I'm talking specifically to Arena now. And then there will be these balancing iterations, right? And then when we feel comfortable with the balancing of everything, subsequently, it can make into a chapter as well, while we have this log of releases, I think. So I think it would help in this regard, not for future, let's say, lack of Gotchiverse Bible chapters, because things are not entirely confirmed, but rather on the ongoing developments. If you have smaller chunks of being able to track what's happening, because as Jesse mentioned, people like to crunch numbers. We have people who can do those things, and these kind of things I think would naturally evolve into a chapter if we had this kind of track record of just this patches, a little more detailed laid out in some blog post or so. This is kind of my main concern, that we can't really keep track what's being changed between versions of that well, at least with the Gotchiverse one. It will be really, really much more important with the Arena, as there will be discussions revolving balancing.
Transparency in what you're specifically talking about, where people want access to some of the raw numbers. It reminds me of something we want to do this year, and that is D-work. We're always talking about in terms of when is the DAO going to run a D-work. We also want to run a D-work and run a very ambitious bounty program where it's actually easier, right? We can issue bounties for what we're doing at Pixelcraft, and everyone here can contribute if they can fulfill the bounties. So it's not a direct answer to your question, but it definitely fits into kind of they almost go hand in hand.
Yeah. And as far as the balancing, like the Arena, we didn't, from what I saw from the JIRA, I think the changes that were actually pushed in this second playtest, like we actually weren't planning to make a lot of changes in this playtest. So I'm actually looking at the data myself and be like, why did these change? And we're talking about it as a team, because the Arena playtest 2 was mainly to introduce the enemies, and we're working on a lot of basically creating this Arena was a big step for the team, and there was a lot of code involved in the switch, because we basically now, instead of having one hard coded area, we have 2 areas, and then soon we'll have 3 areas. So the work that you go from doing 1 area to 2 areas is actually quite significant. We had to kind of make a lot of areas that are in the code more dynamic to support the 2 areas. So what I'm thinking is that we actually weren't really planning to do a big balance change for this one. It was supposed to be for the 3rd playtest, but I think what happened is just there were some bugs or something that got into some areas, or some presets that were somehow shared that ended up it leading to the differences in the melee and the like ranged charge attacks. So I completely agree with you. When we make intentional balance changes, those will definitely be published, and we'll let you guys know what the intention behind those balance changes were, just like any other like AAA game does.
Yeah, yeah, or indie games. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm. Awesome.
yeah, and yeah, that's. I don't want to take away too much space from the curve discussion, but my thinking was just, yeah, maybe it's worth just asking first whether we turned off or not, and then proceed accordingly. But that's just my take on it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your insights. And we did take a little detour there, but I think it was some important points to cover there, and I'm glad we were able to get through that. We are, Coder Dan's, he's on his last headphone there. I don't know how long that's going to go on for. So it might be a good time for us to wrap up here. We're at about an hour and 40 minutes. Just one more thing I want to plug here before we wrap up. Bowtied Nerd is just doing an awesome job right now of running this text-based RPG or text-based roleplay in the Aavegotchi DAO forum. So it's a way for us to build some community-sourced lore around the Gotchiverse. The Gotchiverse light paper left a lot of holes to be filled, a lot of gaps to be filled by us, and so we can create our own side stories. And I've been following the roleplay chat there, and it's been quite entertaining. So. Another thing, just no future here, reminding me, got to ask for feedback on a pitch deck for Eat Denver. So actually, I put together a document, and we are actually working on an internal version of this, but I made a external facing version for any input you guys might have for specific pitches at Eat Denver. So we would like to make this a collaborative process between ourselves and the DAO. You guys are kind of, in a way, hiring us to go and represent the DAO. So we would like to know your inputs on possibly some of the things, some of the approaches that we could take to the different archetypes of personalities that we'll meet at Eat Denver. So let me just give you this, hook you up with this link here. So check out this Google Doc. It allows for commenting on it, so you can comment throughout the document if you do have some pitches for our Eat Denver interactions. So looking forward to your feedback on that. And next week we can possibly maybe even share some of the things that we came up with.
Hefe, I got a quick question on that. I think it would be so much more productive so much more powerful if, when you guys are in Denver and you're meeting anybody, but especially the devs, that there's a D-work you can point them towards. Now, you said the D-work's already up. What is the blocker, or what is the next step for at least the first of maybe many D-works that get funded, depending how you guys end up structuring the DAO? But regardless, is there going to be a D-work or Wonderverse that we can point people towards when you guys are on the ground there?
Yeah, so the plan there is to create a workspace specifically for Eat Denver on the Aavegotchi D-work, and that way it'll be transparent for people to see what bounties we are issuing. And we did request a pool specifically for bounties, and those bounties will be open for anybody at Eat Denver. We do have some that we have in mind in regards to like video processing. If somebody wants to do some editing, there's going to be some bounties for that. Of course, there'll be bounties available for people helping us set up at the event. But those will all be issued through D-work. I'll be issued. Yeah.
But you understand what I'm saying is to point to the new devs that are like, hey, you should be building on Gotchi chain, on Gotchi protocol. There are bounties waiting for you to snag. That's more what I'm thinking, not for.
Right. Okay. So
right?
yeah.
Like, dude, there's like a dozen things you guys could be building on Gotchiverse right now.
Yeah.
In the Aavegotchi protocol, you just got to come hop in, and a lot of them are probably already on D-work with other DAOs, right? So it's like, that's one of the benefits of D-work is they're already building somewhere else. They can easily come over with no friction. So we just need to find like a half dozen things that we definitely know we want. Do we want DAO dashboards? Do we want analytics tools? What do we want a game? Whatever you guys want to fund. I wish it's getting a little late here to get it, but we've got about 3 weeks. It'd just be amazing if somebody could put up a SIG prop with like 6 things to fund using D-Work and figure out the committee and the task force later, but like just get something out there. That's my suggestion.
No, I totally hear you with that. It is something that we want to have for ETH Denver because they do have the build. They're calling it the Biddler's Palace, and that's going to be a place specifically for where devs that are looking for things to build that didn't come to ETH Denver with something specific in mind for the hackathon, they can actually pick up these bounties at the Biddler's Palace, this venue at ETH Denver. And so we're hoping to have at least some Aavegotchi based bounties. And so I just put it in the chat there. I think we're well overdue for a D-Work bounty thread, and I'll get that going right after this call so we can get some community input too on what you guys think would be really good bounties for us to offer from Aavegotchi's perspective. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Just reading some of the comments here. ETH Denver turn play drop on for 1 week. Yeah, there's always that option, right, of turning the play. Arena playtest. Oh yeah, this was the other thing. If it would be possible to get a arena playtest, maybe while we're at ETH Denver, it could be interesting to showcase the arena being this really interesting experience in the Gotchiverse. I don't know. Coder Dan's headphones might be dead.
Yeah,
Oh.
I think we are. That should coincide very well. It's like the end of February, right? So
yeah,
should coincide with the end of our second sprint here in February. So I think we'll definitely have something. Hopefully there'll be some big features that we've been working on that I've kind of talked about in previous hangouts. Those are getting very close to being like ready for testing. So could be a pretty interesting playtest / experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that. That'll be great to showcase some of those things. We do have a coffee shop event. We have the venue secured. I was talking to Lost Local, been working with him closely on this plan, and it is a very much a collaborative process with his vision and kind of what we're available to do at ETH Denver for ETH Denver. So yeah, I'm stoked. I'm glad to see the DAO is supporting some sort of IRL event presence, and we plan to impress the DAO with what we can do there. So that pretty much wraps up our meeting. I don't think we had anything else pressing for today. I appreciate you guys everyone up here taking the time and coming up here on Sundays. It's a big deal. Not many people get up this early on a Sunday, so. I really appreciate you guys. And, for you guys, Coder Dan, Jesse, it's probably getting late for you guys. So appreciate you staying up for us and getting through this meeting.
Yeah, always a pleasure, fam.
Absolutely. Well, so we do a Twitter Spaces every Wednesday. That's going to be the next time you can hang out with us. Actually, Tuesday you can hang out with ZombieShepherd and Z-Fi. They do a podcast. GMI podcast called Touch Grass and E to Z. Wednesday is we almost have something for every day of the week, to be honest. So it's pretty great. We got Wednesday, we got our Gotchi space, or not Gotchi spaces, but Twitter spaces with Golden Cross, and there's interesting guests brought up on stage every week. And then if we don't see you then, we'll see you next week at either Friday's GMI or Saturday Hangout. So hope you all have a good week. And yeah, peace out, friends.
Later, friends.
Later.
Goodbye.